it's an offering to my body. It's like a
Mm,
moment when I can feel my sense of self-worth. Like I can feel like, wow, I'm taking like this time to cook this meal. That must mean that my body is worthy and my body is good enough and I'm good enough because I'm taking
mm,
the time. And it becomes this like positive feedback loop to where the food makes me feel good. I feel good producing it. And it just is a very pleasurable experience throughout.
Welcome to the Holistic Life Navigation Podcast, where we explore life through the lens of somatics. I'm Luis Mujica, a somatic educator who teaches people how to find safety in themselves. Your turn to learn begins now. Okay, I'm here with my friend Lacou. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've been in my spaces for a while in different spaces. I think a course and then mentorship and just different places. And I've really gotten to get a sense of your spirit and your work and just how you integrate this work into your life seamlessly. I get these senses from people when they're speaking, and you really embody it and have created your own kind of culture from it, from how I see it at least. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
really curious to get to know you more because I don't, when I'm in groups of people, I don't really get to know them individually. I know them as the collective. I'm just so curious about, I want to talk about your work and I want to talk about what led you to it and really just how somatics is helping you amplify your own understanding of yourself and what you do. So I think with that being said, let's start simply.
Mm-hmm.
Just introducing yourself to us first. Like, what do you want us to know about you?
Oh, there's just like so much I wanted to say just hearing the introduction and um, that you just shared. But a little bit about me is that I'm a pleasure eating coach and I've been working in this space for about 8 years now. And I started out as a nutritionist and sort of evolved into specifically working with binge eaters over the last 5 years. And um, I got into this space because I was struggling with binge eating in college, studying to be a nutritionist, and yeah, I was binging all throughout my um, bachelor degree in nutrition and just feeling like so confused as to why all of the behavioral practices, why all of the sort of coachy stuff I was learning wasn't working on me. So uh, when I got out of college, I kind of had this like uh, the space where I was in where I knew I didn't want to work as a dietitian. So I worked as a nutritionist and slowly found my way back to binge eating. I kind of wanted to like get away from binge eating after I'd recovered in college and um, but I just came back to it from meeting with people who were struggling with binge eating and um, slowly just allowed kind of that to lead me back into working specifically with binge eaters. But after I'd recovered, I realized I had a lot of confusion about what I had experienced and a lot of shame. So I think I didn't know how to talk about my story with binge eating. I didn't know how to be with it in a way that felt supportive and nourishing. Therefore, I kind of like ran away from it for a couple of years until the universe brought me all of these clients who were struggling with binge eating. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I should face this, my own like history with binge eating and also support others. Um, so yeah, that's a bit of how it all started for me and a bit of my journey. And when I found your work, I was just so like jaw-dropping resonant with it. It felt like you were speaking about all these things that I'd experienced, but you had like this language for it. Um, I call my practice a pleasure eating process because when I was binge eating, I thought that I was eating for pleasure, but when I really like felt into what pleasure felt like for my body, it wasn't like that escape feeling that I got from binges. And the way I experienced your work is like experiencing the pleasure of now as opposed to using something to escape from now. Um, and that just like resonates with me so much. And yeah, has been the reason why I've been sticking around for a while and really love your work.
Well, I love that. I think why I was drawn to have you on, because I resonate with, how you speak about this work in group and such, is
Mhm.
probably because we have so many parallels with studying nutrition, both being binge eaters, learning the somatics and the trauma history that goes with binging. And I think there's a lot I want to ask you based on what you just said. I'll start with just saying again, or asking again for a little more depth around pleasure eating coach. Like, tell us what that means. What does that look like?
Yeah, so pleasure eating is basically focusing and attuning to pleasure in various different layers. And so getting clear on what pleasure feels like for you, that involves like fully receiving the moment with food, fully receiving the moment with your challenging emotions, rather than quickly feeling something and then kind of turning away to food. So that's pleasure eating. It's coming to food fed, I like to say. So feeding yourself with the nourishment of feeling your feelings fully, of feeling that satiation before you get to a meal. So I like to teach my clients to feel their feelings first, come to food a bit more satiated. And I think in your space, it's regulated so that they can really experience the pleasure of a meal. Because when I was binging, I would just like, the most pleasurable part was planning my binges, if I was really like honest about it. It wasn't actually eating it because I had so much shame during the process that I wasn't actually enjoying the food I was binging on.
Wait, we have to
So
pause there. I love that because as you're saying it, I'm getting a flashback of I worked at this health food store and I was binging so much there. And when I was planning my binge, when I was thinking, "Ooh, I have a 15-minute break. I'm gonna get that hummus and those chips and this peanut butter." I was, planning it all. It was so exciting and I could feel all the sensation. And then when I actually sat down and began binging, I dissociated. I wasn't even able to feel. Was that how it was for your body?
yeah, I would just kind of like leave because there's so much like judgment around the act of binging itself that I would just leave my body because it was so painful to be there with it through that process. But towards the end of my binging, I actually learned to be very present during the binges. And this is what I teach my clients. And like when you're that present with a binge, it's kind of a wake up call.
It
Like,
is.
wow, this is really what I'm doing. This is really what I'm experiencing. And it's not pleasurable.
I think this is really great that we're talking about this because as much as I want to speak about your story, which this is part of that, I think the somatics of binging is something I wanted to speak about on the podcast for so long. And I
Yeah.
haven't, because it's been my history, I just haven't for some reason. But this is a great chance to do it with someone that specializes in that. And you have this language. I think it's great for people hearing this because the binging has shame And it has even the connotation or the overcoupling that it's enjoyable. Like I'm enjoying my food, or I binge
Right.
because I get pleasure out of it. But if everyone listening here considers the somatics of binging, the biology of a binge is it's very uncomfortable. I'll speak for myself. It was so physically uncomfortable as it became embodied, and I could feel the
Mhm.
pain that was meeting the huge loads of food I was eating. And that's what helped me recover. Like when you said you recovered, it was just being present. I couldn't do it while I was present. I could do
Mhm.
it dissociated, but not present. So can you just walk
Yeah.
us through that uncoupling a bit of this idea of binging being pleasurable?
Yeah. So I can speak to like one moment specifically that really woke me up to this. I was binging all day, and a friend invited me out to have dinner with her, and I didn't know how to say no back then when someone offered me food. So even though I was like full after a day of binging, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go sit with you. And then I didn't plan to eat anything, but I ate an entire meal. And that night, like, was the worst pain I've ever felt from a binge. Um, and that pain, like, really, like, it uncoupled for me. I think that binging was pleasurable because it was literally, um, like, when I think of it now, like, I can feel like my belly tightened because it was hard to breathe. It was like my belly was so tight, it was hard to breathe. And I just felt so uncomfortable in my body. Like it was hard to move. And we had to take the bus home. And it was just like a really uncomfortable situation. And I think also that was the first time I had binged away from home. So I didn't have like my resources to help me
Mm,
feel better. I
hmm.
had to like hop on a bus and take this like journey back home, and I had to walk to our apartment that I shared with my friend. And so that entire experience really like made it possible for me to feel rather than dissociate from the feeling that I usually was able to dissociate from, that the binge was causing, and allowed me to uncouple.
This is important. I love this because I think if we can kind of honor and understand the need for the binging, as an expression, it's
Mm-hmm.
lack of capacity for the pain or emotions. And then we dissociate, and in the dissociative state are able to binge because you can feel the discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you finally reassociate again, there's so much literal stuff between you and those feelings that were hard before the binge that it
Mm-hmm.
serves the purpose
Okay.
of soothing that, of muting it a bit until you
Right.
digest, and then it's there again. And it becomes this cycle, right? Of this
Yeah.
kind of this way of managing what you don't know how to manage otherwise or be with.
Yeah, and you never really get to the root
Hmm.
feeling because,
Yeah.
the first layer is like, for me, it was feeling the pain of the binge. And then once I was comfortable with that and I was binging as much, because I just didn't want to feel bad, not because I didn't want to binge. I just didn't want to feel the feelings that the binge caused. Then I had to feel like everything that the binge was avoiding. So it's like, that's why I think
Mm-hmm.
it's so helpful to have support in this recovery process, because it's like once you stop binging, then you kind of start the work of feeling your feelings. And it's like,
Okay,
that's when
so
you want to
let's
relax.
pause there. So before learning somatic work, what got you through that embodying of what you were muting before with food? What
Yeah.
tell us about that?
Yeah. I knew nothing about somatic work, but I knew um, that I just wanted to feel good. Like something in me was like, okay, look, you just want to feel good. And food is actually not helping you feel good. So when I really like understood that in my body, like I started doing other things that made me feel good, like really simple things like walking and meditating and dancing. And I think it was these practices that allowed me the capacity to like feel what was underneath the urge to binge, or what I was avoiding with the binges. So for me, that happened very organically. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but that's kind of how it played out.
So that's another parallel because I didn't have somatic work when I was recovering either, but it
Mm.
was this very real time embodiment. And essentially, what you're talking about is creating positive overcouplings, with your body so you could move to something like dance, which would positively overcouple and feel pleasurable. And so your pain or whatever it is you were sitting with could move to that, and it became something I say a lot in addiction circles. It becomes another option. It's like when
Mhm.
we have an addiction, it's an addiction because that's so far the only option we've found that's effective. But when there's
Mhm.
these other options that are effective, you just have more resourcing and you're less dependent on that other piece.
Right. And those options seemed effective to me because I had already uncoupled at that point the truth that binging was not pleasurable. It's
Mm,
actually in my body very painful.
mm.
I'd sat with enough of them. And so I was searching for things that actually felt pleasurable for me and were sustainably pleasurable.
I really love this as an invitation for people listening. Just something that, those of you listening, if you think about something you do that you don't like that you do, or that isn't, quote, good for you, but you keep doing it, just checking in with yourself to see, have you embodied your body while doing that yet? Or is it just an
Mhm.
idea that you shouldn't do it? Because this piece about uncoupling pleasure from binging and actually overcoupling pain and discomfort with binging, that's what helped you heal from binging. And
Yeah.
that's what helps, right? What helps most people heal from addiction is they actually feel how it feels to do it instead of the story that they like it, they get something good out of it.
Yeah, because I mean, it started out that way. So it makes sense that that story happens and that
Hmm.
overcoupling happens because it started out super pleasurable for sure. Um, and then it just like went down after many years. It wasn't pleasurable anymore.
So something you just said reminded me, and I wanted to ask you about your experience. What I found beautiful with my relationship with food was I was so food obsessed, right? And now I still am, but it's in this whole different realm. So instead of being obsessed with how much I can eat and so often because it feels bad, I wouldn't even say obsessed. Now there's this joy of, oh, I can't wait to eat that thing that nourishes me. And as I'm eating it, it's like so intimate and sensual and decadent. Like every bite is just incredible. So there's this savoring and pleasure, which initially I also found with binging, that then became a habit and was painful. But it's transmuted now to, well, there's that similar movement toward food and like worshiping it, but in a
Mhm.
way that's much more nourishing. Have you found that same transmutation?
Yeah,
Okay, tell us about that.
for sure. Oh my gosh, that's so cool that you experienced that too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so food used to be this like thing that was like God. Like it was like this
Yes.
thing I put on a pedestal and
Oh,
it
yes.
was like I
The
can't wait
refrigerator
to,
was the altar.
yeah, and like just like all these different places on campus where I would like plan out my binges throughout so I could get through the day and like um but now it's like it's an offering to my body. It's like a
Mm,
moment when I can feel my sense of self-worth. Like I can feel like, wow, I'm taking like this time to cook this meal. That must mean that my body is worthy and my body is good enough and I'm good enough because I'm taking
mm,
the time. And it becomes this like positive feedback loop to where the food makes me feel good. I feel good producing it. And it just is a very pleasurable experience throughout instead of just like thinking about it. Like now I think about like, ooh, what recipes can I make with this, and that? And instead of like, how much of this can I eat? And how can I hide the evidence that I've eaten it? It's just like a very I guess positively overcoupled experience where I'm thinking about like, ooh, this is gonna do this for my body, and then I can cook it that way. And then like during the process of cooking, I'm like getting to be so present with the food and like thank the food where it came from. And it's just like
Mm-hmm.
a beautiful immersive experience of genuine pleasure as opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm eating too much, I'm so bad, like I'll never do this again. Like the train of thought is very different, and for me it's a prioritization of feeling good, a prioritization of pleasure rather than shaming myself, which was the kind of driver force for those binges and like the thoughts about the binges and all that that went into that.
I love that because I also hear in that story an uncoupling of shame from eating and an overcoupling of honoring. Like
Mhm.
eating became this prideful, honoring ritual, and that replaced the shame that might have
Yeah,
propelled like more binging.
right, right. And the other thing was like after I had spent so many years binging, I spent close to 8 years binging. And so like now I just feel like I have this opportunity to nourish my body in ways that I couldn't. So it's like it's such a privilege, I guess, and an honor to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and like just talking about it now, it makes me feel so like grateful to be in this space in like one lifetime, because when I was
Mm.
going through it, like I thought that was going to be it. Like this is the relationship with food. This is how it's supposed to be. So it's pretty amazing to be able to make that shift.
It's so beautiful. I love how you said in one lifetime because binge eating is often an inherited trauma from family and ancestors
Mm,
because it's a way to manage. So you grow up in your family system, and there's usually one or more people that also will do that. And
yeah.
not always, but usually. Yeah, my family was the same. It was my dad. And I think what was interesting when you just said in one lifetime, it's like the beautiful thing about trauma is when we start to create that capacity for what's unpleasant inside and outside of us, then these ways of coping with it, these trauma responses, they dissolve out of our bodies. And some of these are centuries, they go far back, very far in our bloodline. So, in one lifetime to transmute that, there's also, for a lot of us, an intergenerational aspect of this healing.
Oh, when you say that, I just think of my mom and how like
Mm.
me healing binge eating in my body like prevents it from continuing in like the bodies of my children if I have someday. Um, wow, that's just to feel into that. It feels so powerful and potent.
It really is. It's not a small thing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, I'm so curious. So, when we were talking before I hit record, you were saying you felt tender, right? Because of how you're kind of relating to your work right now. I
Yeah.
mean, you're so embodied as we're speaking about it, and you're so alive with it. Like I feel your work in you right now. Tell us what's the deal with your actual work? How are you doing it? How are you wanting to do it? What's that look like right now?
So right now I'm working one on one with folks. And I take folks through a 3 month or a 6 month journey, depending on their need. And when I got on this call, I was sharing how burnt out I feel. um, Not so much like working with folks, like I feel burnt out with the social media and the marketing and sales piece of my work. Um, and I really haven't been marketing my business that much. And it's
Yeah.
uh, kind of a scary place to be in because that's like how I make my income and how I sustain myself. Um, so it's really interesting to like feel the excitement about my work because it's really letting me know that it's not my work itself that I'm like burnt out about. I'm really burnt out about the stuff that um I feel like I have the words for this now after our like mentorship course, uh,
Hmm.
for the parts that I have low capacity for, which is the marketing and the sales. I just have very little capacity for that right now.
This is such a good thing for everyone to hear because a lot of people with their own businesses listen to this. And
Mm,
just to really separate the difference, like we talk about in the mentorship, the soul of your business, and then all the
mm.
things that maintain it, you know, it's very clear that you have a ton of capacity for the soul of your work. You know, you're excited about it, you have wisdom, you're embodied, like you're lighting up as we're talking about it. And that other part of it is kind of dimming that flame, you know.
Yeah, it feels like it. I just feel like um, for so long I've been um, like pushing through, I guess, to
Mm,
show up online.
mm-hmm.
And I feel like I know what works to get like engagement and stuff. And I just feel very out of alignment with that approach anymore. Like it just feels so, I feel so heavy thinking about having to post on Instagram and having to do sales calls.
Would you be interested in doing a little somatic dive with me right now?
Yeah.
Because you said you're just saying important things that I can't
Yeah.
ignore. So when you said so when you said about this is the soul of my work coming through.
Okay.
When you said pushing through, whenever I hear that, and then I hear a sentence that follows that statement with "I'm exhausted, I'm heavy, I'm burnt out," I think perfect because pushing through literally means there's a part of me that's saying no and I'm bypassing it. So to have an exhaustion and even a depression or any kind of overwhelm from pushing through, that's a healthy embodied response to pushing through, similar to what we talked about with binging. It's a healthy embodied response to feel the pain of your stomach being so full from pushing past your boundaries because you
Right.
dissociated. So this is paralleling what we're talking about in a different sense.
Yeah, I
Can
love
you,
that.
me too. Can you tell us right now in this moment, what have you been pushing through? Like, where's the part in you that says no and you haven't been listening because you had to survive?
Mm. I feel in my chest, like my chest just feels very tender and wants to just hide away in like on like a private island with no one looking at me.
Absolutely. Can we be with that for a moment?
Yeah.
And see if you want a pillow or your hands or just to feel it. And just tell us what happens next.
I notice that my chest just feels so nourished with my hands here.
Mhm. Mm. Stay with that for a moment. For those of you listening and not watching, Lacou has her hands just kind of holding this part of her chest that wanted to be unseen and left alone, nurturing this part in herself. You just tell us where that takes you next.
Yeah, it takes me to what I've been pushing through.
Good. Tell us, what is that?
um, so I feel like I'm a very private person. And I feel like I've been pushing through that by sharing bits and pieces of myself online, and just posting online. Um, I feel like it has been so beneficial to share my journey, but it also feels like an overextension.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and I feel the tenderness of that.
Let's stay with that and see if you can notice the difference between that tenderness and the place that loves the work. Again, that soul of your business. Like, what are those feelings like inside of you?
Mhm. So the tenderness I feel in my chest, and it's kind of like going down, it's like spreading down into my belly.
Hmm.
And like the soul of my business, I feel like more in near my collarbone. And
Hmm.
that feels like a bubbly warmth.
Just noticing those two differences really, it's really important. You're teaching us a lot from this right here because those other sensations tend to win and we think that it's everything. But
Mm,
you're showing us, you're following, you're listening to your body, and you're finding this truth that, oh, the sharing of my personal experience is feeling too tender for me right now. It's not the work, it's the sharing of my personal experience. Just feeling that difference and seeing where that takes you.
I feel like this bubbliness move up into the top of my head, and it feels
Mhm.
tingly there. And I feel some tingly going down my left arm into the my belly.
Nice, nice. Yeah, to see what it does, let it move.
I feel so amazed.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? What's really cool is then you get to play with uncoupling marketing from sharing things that are too personal.
Yeah. Mm. Wow. So what I'm getting from that is that I've been pushing through my body's boundary to like stay very private about certain parts of my journey,
Mm.
in sharing that to connect with my audience. And I'm learning that I don't have to do that.
Mm. That's so
Mm.
gorgeous. Look how quick you learned that. I mean, it's just like, it's amazing how much is in the body. All that wisdom's like sitting right there.
Mhm. Yeah. Like that doesn't feel like the complete story, but it feels like a big part of it.
It's the way in. And then there's so much more that you get to sit
Yeah.
with now.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that with me because there's only been a few guests that I've done real time somatic work with on the podcast. And it's always helped so many people listening to witness and do it along with that body. I mean, you've sat through many of my demos. You
I
know how
have. They're so
helpful it is.
helpful.
Yeah, like I love demos.
I'm so glad I could do that with you.
Yeah. So I mean, you just help so many people, which is incredible. I'm wondering as we sit here and you think about what just happened, and especially you attune to that excitement, that bubbliness of your work, what's next? Like in this moment, what wants to be expressed to those listening about your work or about how you work or what you want to do?
Oh. I think what I'd like to express is just um, that the journey of recovery can be really pleasurable.
Ooh, yes. Yes, more. Tell us more. Tell us more about that.
Like, it does seem like this big serious thing, I have to
Yeah.
recover and it has to be like ASAP. And that's like, I feel like the biggest thing that helped me with my recovery and that I do my best to instill in my clients is this, just letting go of the expectation of losing the weight, the expectation of never
Mm,
binging again, the expectation that it needs to look a certain way. Like, just allow yourself to recover and like just do what genuinely feels pleasurable. And I think one of the biggest things that we can do along the recovery process that really worked for me is, I didn't really identify as a binge eater, even though that was my experience. I just thought that I had an obsession with food. And so I think not identifying as a binge eater really helped me just stay with the feeling and like the truth of wanting to feel what I call like genuine pleasure,
mm.
as opposed to that like temporary high that I got from binging. And so, yeah, just seeking that true pleasure of being with your body, of um, feeling how it feels to be in the body, and allowing that to lead you to practices that enhance that pleasure, like long term, like whatever it is for you, like dance or walking or any type of movement, which has been really helpful for me. I think that's something I want to share and make sure that everyone is aware of.
I love that so much. We, we at Holistic Life Navigation, we really believe that trauma healing can be fun and it can be silly and it can be pleasurable and it can be fascinating. And we don't tend to attune to those descriptions of any kind of recovery. We think it's like long and arduous and painful, and sometimes that's part of it as well. And attuning to other piece, it's just there's so much resourcing that comes from that. Where can people find your work? How can someone work with you if they hear this and they want to dive in?
Folks can find me on Instagram, even though I'm not very active on it right now.
Yeah,
It's at Lacou Flipse, and that's at LACOUFLIPSE. And yeah, there's a wealth of like old posts up there if you want to look at my methodology a little deeper, and you can also find my website on there too.
beautiful. And you're also now on our referred and preferred practitioner list, which we started. So, any of you listening, the best thing about working with Lacou, if you love the work that I do, is she's so marinated in it. She gets it. And if you want someone that's not just um, really embodied with recovery from binge eating, she's trauma informed and
Mm,
has just so many practices she can lend to you to help your body feel safe as you recover. So thank you, my friend, just for showing
thank
up in our
you.
spaces with so much of yourself and the work you do.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to be here today.
That's the end of today's episode. Now let's take a moment to notice where we feel the episode in our bodies. Close your eyes. Take a breath. And let whatever wants to come up, come up. And remember, those sensations hold the wisdom that we're looking for. If you want to go deeper, visit holisticlifenavigation.com.